Good afternoon and welcome to the Rotary Club of Tulsa, the 5,276th meeting of the Rotary Club of Tulsa, Club 2500, District 6110. We've got another awesome program today. We're glad that you came, and you're going to be glad you're here. You know, this is a high enough quality meeting that Mike Neal from the Tulsa Chamber of Commerce is here today. Now, you may not know this, but Mike Neal is one of the guys I strive to emulate when I'm in a position like this, because he has such a great presence when he's selling our city, and he's so effective at it. I hope to be a shade of as effective as he is. Mike, thank you for all you do for our community. It's a joy to be together today as Rotarians. We're going to kick off our meeting with an invocation, pledge, and guest introductions from Alan Whalen.
Let us pray. Loving God, we gather today with grateful hearts, thankful for the gift of community, for friendship, and for the shared purpose that unites us as Rotarians. As we meet today, may our conversations be guided by respect, any decisions shaped by wisdom, and our efforts strengthened by compassion. Remind us that every act of kindness, every moment of integrity, and every bit of service offered in humility helps to build a better Tulsa and a better world. Bless our time together today, and may we leave this gathering renewed in our commitment to serve others above ourselves. Amen. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please have a seat. Well, welcome again to the Rotary Club of Tulsa. We have a number of guests today. If you would stand when I call your name, both the Rotarian and the guest, and remain standing until the end of all of the guests, and then we'll hold our applause until that point. Our speaker today, Sid McAnally, has Julie White, Leah Harper, Heather Earle, and Elizabeth Osborne. Roger Ramsire has Connor Carroll and Jeff Pepin. Brian Jackson has Kyle Coulter. Kaiden Creekpalm has his daughter Zella Creekpalm. Sheree Gardner has Robert Owens. Brenda Melancon has Chase Mowry. Andrea Bartlett has Aaron Wendt. And I have our club's Rotary Youth Exchange student from the Netherlands, Willem Overmars. Welcome and come back soon.
I love a guest speaker who brings a whole table full of visitors to our club. Mr. McAnally, we need to have you back more often. How many of y'all still bother to look at the Tulsa World? Did you see the article on Sunday? I thought the guy who wrote that article must be just incredibly gifted and talented, just a remarkable, and oh, Mike Decker, you're sitting right there. Holy cow, man. Thank you, seriously, thank you so much for that coverage, and you're welcome at our club anytime. Anything we can do to make your job less difficult, we'll do it, because I know in this time and age, it's a challenge, isn't it? So the great thing about that article in the Tulsa World was it talked a little bit about the Rotary DNA that we discussed at that meeting with the Mayo Hotel and the call from President Kennedy. I think there's going to be a little more on that in an upcoming issue of the World, maybe. So look for that as well. Today, our Rotary DNA is about a remarkable preservation project. Shows the power of Rotary service and community partnership. Now, back in 2003-2004 Rotary year was a year I joined the club. Karen Keith, who later became our 100th president, was serving as the chief of staff at the Tulsa mayor's office. She learned that something called the Burl Ford Collection, a massive archive of Tulsa history, was about to be sold. And do you know who the most likely suitor for that collection was? It was Oklahoma City. Boo, boo. Oklahoma City was going to buy one of the very best collections of Tulsa history that existed. Karen was determined to keep it here in Tulsa, and she turned to the Rotary Club of Tulsa with the support of then-President John O'Connor and President-elect Steve Clark. Our club adopted that project, acquiring that collection as our official centennial project. So what was the Burl Ford Collection? It was the life's work of Rotarian Burl Ford, who was a contractor in Tulsa, grew up here, lived here his whole life, and he was one of those guys, my wife would call him a hoarder, but he was hoarding Tulsa history and archives. Over the decades, he gathered thousands of photos, newspapers, books, artifacts. His garage was literally packed to the rafters with Tulsa's past. Now, I got to see that. In 1986, I was part of the team that put together the 60th anniversary celebration for the Phil Tower building downtown. To do that celebration, we wanted to present some historic photos of the construction of the building and whatnot, and nobody had none. But somebody told me about this guy, Burl Ford, in his garage, and I can't remember who put me in touch with him, but I went to his house, and with one of my colleagues, Stan Hubble, and we talked to him and said, we're trying to do something. Phil Tower, what do you got? And we're standing in his garage, piles of stuff. You couldn't tell what was what. And he kind of scratched beside his nose. He said, Phil Tower, let me see. And he kind of walked over to a pile of boxes and pulled a box out, pried open the lid, reached in, pulled out a file, and it was full of Phil Tower historical photos. Now, nobody else could have found that, but Burl knew where everything was. So to guide the project of acquiring and cataloging all that, Steve and John tapped Jerry Cornelius. How many of you remember Jerry Cornelius? He was a longtime Rotary member. He was the executive director. Over the next 4 years and nearly $500,000 raised, the Rotary Club of Tulsa cataloged, scanned, and archived that collection. A nonprofit trust was formed. Karen chaired it, and many community leaders stepped up to fund it. The Lorton family of the Tulsa World at that time, Chester Cadjo of Quick Trip, and many others. I was in the committee meeting in 2004 when they started to raise the initial $35,000 to get the ball rolling. And many of you remember Dick Gable. He was there and he was kind of overseeing the meeting and said, we need to raise $35,000 to cover this, and if we could find 10 Rotarians at $3,500 apiece, that would get us there. I was brand new to the club, not very bright, and I put my hand up. And he said, you're the first 3,500. That's great, thank you. Who else? So that's one way to raise money, I guess. I guess the story, Roger, don't raise your hand for no apparent reason in a meeting here. With the help of Rotarian Linda Saferite and the Tulsa City County Library, the entire collection was digitized and made available online. Willem, if you want to learn about Tulsa history, You can Google the Burl Ford collection and look at all the pictures of old Tulsa you want to. Bound volumes that Burl had accumulated of the Tulsa World and Tulsa Tribune went to the library, the Tulsa Library. On August 11, 2004, in this room, at a Rotary luncheon, the agreement to preserve the collection was officially signed, and Burl and Lydia Ford were here to sign it. Mr. Ford passed away not so very long after that. We were glad that the Rotary took the action to acquire that collection. Thanks to the vision and generosity of so many of the people in this club and around the Tulsa community, this treasure is now proudly known as the Burl Ford Rotary Club of Tulsa Collection, a legacy of our club's commitment to protecting Tulsa's history for future generations. So there's your Rotary DNA for today. It's another great story. Another great thing about this job, besides trying to be like Mike Neal, is I get to introduce Rotarians of the day like Roger Ramsire. Roger is Vice President and Market Leader for Cox Communications in Northeast Oklahoma, where he oversees operations spanning construction, planning, Cox Business, Cox Media, field engineering, residential services, and more. Roger's one of the least bored individuals you'll meet. Before joining Cox, Roger held senior leadership roles with Invista and Koch Industries, and earlier spent 12 years with Bank 4 and Nations Bank, now Bank of America, in corporate marketing and communications. Now, the thing to me that makes Roger most qualified to be the Rotarian today is he was president of the Rotary Club of Wichita. What year was that, Roger? 2000. So it's been a quarter of a decade, but he's a past Rotary president. He helped advise me on setting up this year for my Rotary term, and I'm thankful for that, Roger. Roger served in leadership in many civic and educational organizations. He's a past chair of the Tulsa Regional Chamber of Commerce and currently serves on a number of boards, including Tulsa's Future, Flight Night, and Tulsa Community College Foundation. He's got a business degree from the University of Kansas, an MBA from the University of Texas at Austin, which we won't hold against him. Please welcome Roger Ramsire.
Thank you, President Carl. You know, today's program ought to be of keen interest to almost every person in this room because the company led by today's speaker touches almost every single one of us, whether that is heating our homes or businesses in the winter, helping provide gas for our stoves or our ovens to help us cook our food, generating power, keeping my hot tub warm, or many other ways that one gas enhances our quality of life. As President and Chief Executive Officer of One Gas and a member of the One Gas Board of Directors, Sid McAnally leads a publicly traded, regulated gas utility serving a whopping 2.3 million customers in Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. And in addition to the company's mission of delivering reliable and affordable energy, One Gas is a leader in safety performance, having received the American Gas Association's award for the fewest injuries compared to peer companies for 8 years in a row. And a guy who knows something about safety, that is pretty unbelievable. I first met Sid a decade ago when we both relocated to Tulsa around the same time, and under the category of first impressions 10 years ago, it struck me, this guy is sharp. And my impression a decade later continues to be true as evidenced by the title he holds today. Sid joined One Gas in 2015 as Senior VP of Operations, responsible for the operations that included Kansas Gas Service, Oklahoma Natural Gas, and Texas Gas Service, which covers the greater Austin area. Sorry, Sooners. Sid was promoted to Chief Operating Officer in 2020, And I recall vividly at the time picking up the phone and consulting with Sid as we both entered uncharted territory in our respective careers, because we both have service technicians who were entering every day the homes of people with COVID. We'd never dealt with anything like that, and this guy's wise counsel helped get us through that and help our companies continue to prosper during that time. Sid was named CEO of One Gas in June of 2021, and in addition to his day job, he serves on the board of directors of the American Gas Association, a well-regarded organization he will chair next year. 2 years ago, he was appointed to the National Petroleum Council by the Secretary of Energy. He's also involved with a variety of other industry associations and charitable organizations. Please join me in giving a warm Rotary welcome to Tulsa's gas man, Sid McAnally.
Take that. Thank you, Ed. It is so good to be with you all. Carl, if I had your voice, I might be president. I was at an AGA meeting last week, and we had a nationally syndicated radio host who spoke about the importance of community. And the things that he talked about are so evidenced by the meeting today. Talking about service, people coming together to be together as much as anything. Respecting local newspapers and the role that local newspapers play in the life of a community. I mean, all those things were covered by this person talking about what we need to recapture in the country. So it's great to be here and get to be with you. Great to see my friend Mike Neal. Great to see Chaz. So thanks a lot. I thought today that we would talk a little bit about the national energy picture. The United States has seen three major shifts in economic policy and energy policy over a fairly short period of time, maybe 15 or 20 years. And energy policy typically runs for much longer than that. So we've had these three disruptive events. And I'd suggest to you that those three events are the impact of shale gas and the impact that shale gas has had on our economy, the emergence of issues around the climate and thinking about the sustainability of energy systems, and the very recent surge in demand around onshoring manufacturing and data centers related to artificial intelligence. Now, I don't think any of those are a surprise to an audience in Tulsa. I've been looking forward to this because I speak a good bit around the country, and for a lot of people, hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling are brand new concepts. So it's good to be in a place where people are very familiar with those, and we can talk a little bit more about energy policy. We all are exposed to a number of projections that are being made around the energy system and what the future looks like, but my experience has been that many of those projections lack any context at all. They're sort of data points that just float in isolation. And so what I hope to do today is share some information with you that can give you the kind of context so we can think about our energy policy and what the implications are for the country. I was asked to talk just a bit about our company, which I'm always glad to do. So Roger mentioned that One Gas is a 100% regulated company. That just means we don't have any operations that aren't regulated by a state regulator, either in Kansas, Oklahoma, or Texas. We serve these three states, as Roger said, and we spend a lot of time talking to analysts about our company because we're publicly traded. We're on the New York Stock Exchange. So these three states, the shaded areas are the areas that we serve of those three states. And you see that it's 71% of Kansas, almost 90% of Oklahoma, and then specific areas in Texas that include Austin, El Paso, an area just northwest of Dallas, and the Gulf Coast. But I talk to a lot of these analysts, and they'll say, well, why don't you guys expand into western Kansas? And I have to say, have you ever been to western Kansas? Because there's just nobody there. We'd love to, and no shade to my friends from western Kansas. But we're lucky that we're in three jurisdictions that are very friendly in the sense that they understand the economic development potential of our fuel. They want us to expand, and we've got regulators that understand the energy system is part of a whole, and we'll talk about that more in a bit. I also, and this is a whole presentation for another day, I want to share with you just for a bit the importance of core values to our company and why I would argue they should be important to your company as well. I appreciated when I came into the company as Senior Vice President of Operations what it meant for everybody in the company to understand that we had things that brought us together, that values bound us together. What I didn't appreciate until I became CEO is how having a set of core values that are well understood across the company aligns the company and gives people a sense of confidence around how decisions will be made and why they will be made. So on a regular basis, we talk to people around the company about how those 5 elements inform our decision making. And we'll talk about specific examples. Some really hard decisions, like I had to make a decision not long after I became CEO about whether or not we were going to require everybody to be vaccinated for the COVID vaccine, because the federal government required us as somebody who had more than 100 employees to do so, and we're a federal contractor because we serve military bases. So, you know, that's not a decision you can delegate. So I sat down with these 5 values and sort of litigated through that, and then engaged my team, and at the end of the day, we decided that while I was very open with people that I got a vaccination, it was not our business to manage the health care of the people that worked at our company. And that, I think, turned out to be a good decision for our folks. So let's talk a bit about the energy system and where we are today. This is information that I think doesn't get nearly enough play generally. I don't think people understand where energy comes from in the United States. So this looks at all of the energy that we use and where it comes from. And it's pretty self-explanatory. If you look to the left side, petroleum at 38% still provides the majority of our energy. And of course, the vast majority of that goes to transportation. No surprise there. And that's a very stable number. If we looked 9 years ago, it would be exactly the same number, 38%. Nuclear is at 9% today and was at 9% 10 years ago. Our nuclear fleet has been very stable in the United States. We've decommissioned some plants. We've added only 2 in the last 20 years or so, and they are both in Georgia, operated by the Southern Company. Then you have a mix of hydroelectric, geothermal, solar, wind, biomass. Those all in the aggregate make up somewhere around 8% of our energy mix. And then you get to coal at 9%. Now, there's been a big change around coal, and we can talk about that more if you'd like to. But that's a number that has changed significantly over the past 10 years, and that number has gone down by about the same amount that natural gas has gone up. So natural gas is now providing almost 40% of the entire energy load in the United States. We all think about it as what heats our home or provides fuel to cook with, or to heat Roger's hot tub, which we're very thankful for, by the way. It's a wildly inefficient way to use natural gas, which is great for our shareholders, so we're grateful for that. So you know, you look at this energy mix, and you kind of see this is how energy mix breaks down in the United States. Now, I'm not going to talk through this slide, but a lot of people come up to me after these talks and say, I want to know more. So if you're a person that wants to know more, this is a slide that's generated every year by Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories, and they go back about 20 years. And it tells you with precision where energy comes from and where energy goes and how it gets there. It's a fascinating map. It's full of information. I highly recommend it to you. All you have to do is Google Lawrence Livermore Energy Map, and you'll get there. Okay, I talked about these 3 dramatic changes, and the first one I want to talk to you about, and most of you probably know about this, but I just want to be sure, because I think as a country, we have not understood the full impact that shale gas has had on our country. Geologists have known for decades and decades and decades that there were enormous amounts of natural gas and oil trapped in shale gas. but nobody could figure out how to get it out. And so it was never included in estimates about our future natural gas reserves as a country. That was true in the late 1970s, 1980s, when the country thought we were going to run out of natural gas. And so policy started to go into place to restrain the amount of natural gas that we were using. But there was a fellow in Texas named George Mitchell who was sure there was a way to crack this rock using a technology called hydraulic fracturing that had been around since the 50s, using water under pressure to break rock. And he bet his company on it. And at the end, he bet everything he had on it. And sort of late in the game, he actually achieved it. So if you saw this chart and it came out to about 2005, it would be at zero. We were not producing any natural gas from shale rock. But look at the massive amount of growth. So that's in billion cubic feet per day. Our natural gas used to come primarily from offshore. So whenever there was a hurricane in the Gulf, rigs were abandoned, the natural gas system shut down, prices spiked. This is all onshore and it's spread across the country. It's an incredible resource for us and a great story about American innovation. And when you combine that hydraulic fracturing with the ability to drop a pipe down into the ground and then take it across inside one of those shale formations, you get this highly efficient way to produce natural gas. And that's what happened. We have not told this story enough, and I'm trying to do my part to correct that. Because this has changed the economy in the United States, it's changed our economic development opportunities, and it's had a geopolitical impact because we're able to support our allies overseas with liquefied natural gas when they have something like the disruptions caused in 2022. We'll look at that in a bit. We were prepared to take advantage of this asset because we had a very robust pipeline system in the United States. This is unique to our country. It has made the ability to move that shale gas from a place that we have it to a place that we need it very efficient. But as we use more and more natural gas, particularly for electric generation, we see that we need more and more supply points. So if you think about the Northeast, think about if we overlaid this map with a population map where people live. You got very dense population in the Northeast all the way down the eastern coast. And if you compare the amount of pipeline capacity they have to the amount of capacity that we have in Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, you see the difference. So there is a robust conversation underway right now trying to understand how do we improve the permitting process to allow us to unlock this in a way that serves people across the country and avoids these constraints for supply. Glad to talk about that in Q&A if you want to talk more about it. There has also been a significant price advantage. Billions and billions of dollars have been created by shale gas because it's so much more efficient to produce. And so this chart shows you how the last few years, through using shale gas, has impacted the price over what we experienced from 2004 to 2009 before we had it. So that shaded area is the price range in that 5-year period for how much natural gas cost. And look at the difference between that 5 years and how much we paid for natural gas then and what we've paid for natural gas in the last 4 years with all of the shale exposure. That's made a difference to your pocketbook and my pocketbook, but especially to our industries. We've seen industries onshore because fuel is less expensive to generate and transport in the U.S. than many places in the world where plants had been moved for economic reasons. You may notice the blue line kind of jumps up. That was 2022. And two things are unique about 2022. One is it was right after 2021. So that is germane, especially to all of us, because that was the year that we had a lot of cold weather in the country, particularly Winter Storm Uri. So we didn't have as much gas in storage as we typically have, and prices started out, as you see, with a little bit of an increase. And then in February, Russia invaded Ukraine. And because Europe got so much of their natural gas from the Russian Nord Stream pipeline, speculators started to speculate on the use of natural gas in the United States. even though we didn't supply natural gas in the same way to Europe. But speculation started that we might do so, and so you saw the price kind of jump around, and then everybody realized we've got so much gas, we could manage that LNG export, and so prices dropped back down, and you see a very stable price deck, 23, 24, and 25 at around $3, $3.50, which is very, very favorable pricing. If you look at the way that we generate electricity, this is really the story. The way that we generate electricity in the country is an interesting story because electric generation was kind of flat. Demand was flat for over 10 years. And so as we looked at how we produce electricity, natural gas, because shale gas was less expensive, started to displace coal as a fuel to generate electricity. There was an interest in reducing carbon emissions, and natural gas provided that over coal, and it's a cleaner fuel across the board. And so you see that coal drops as a supply for electricity, and natural gas fills that gap along with renewables. So I want to be clear about this. I'm all for renewables. I don't have a problem with renewables, and nobody in our industry should either. Renewables are an important part of our energy stack in the United States. But we have to realize that renewables are intermittent, which means that when they're on, and when they're off, they're off. So it's dark a good bit of the 24-hour day period. So solar is going to be dark in that same period. When the wind's not blowing, wind's not effective. So you have to have something that comes up behind that to supply that gap. And we're working on a lot of battery technology across the United States. There are a lot of promising technologies. But right now, what's filling that gap is natural gas. So you see more and more use of natural gas in that sense as well. If you have an interest, this is another tip if you are really interested. The Energy Information Association, a federal agency, has a website that you can go to, EIA, and anytime you care to, you can go to that website and see exactly where the energy that you use is coming from. It breaks it down by region, so you can look at, we're in the Southwest Power Pool, where is the electricity coming from in the Southwest Power Pool? How much gas, how much solar, how much wind, how much coal? It's fascinating to look at, and it's updated every hour. So it's moving in real time in a really interesting way. So something you might want to look at if you have an interest in it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I also want to illustrate, back to George Mitchell, how consequential this discovery was, because it also changed the way that we produce oil and petroleum products. So if you look at this bar chart, the top in 1977 shows how much oil we imported during the Iranian Revolution, so about 50 years ago. And that's in billions of barrels. This is an annual chart. In the Gulf War, we'd made some improvement, but by the Iraq War, we've expanded right back out past 12 billion barrels. And then look at where we are today. We are a net exporter of petroleum and petroleum products because of shale oil. There's also oil locked in that rock with gas. So the geopolitical position of our country, as it stands related to energy, is completely different than it was just 40, 50 years ago. We could never have imagined the level of energy independence that we experience today and the way that we're able to manage our own foreign policy without having to think first about what's going to happen to energy prices. So how is natural gas used? I've talked about, we're almost at 40% of the country's total energy use. How does it get used? Well, we talked about electric power. These are 2024 numbers. So electric power is now up to 41% based on natural gas as a fuel. If you keep going up the left side of that chart, industrials use about a third of our natural gas. So that's something that most of us aren't exposed to. But because natural gas is so efficient in the way it burns, high heat manufacturing processes require natural gas. And we see a lot of industrial use, particularly around fertilizer, but also pharmaceutical products. They're just too many to name in a talk like this, but a substantial part of our industrial economic life. And then you see commercial, which is typically space heating, residential, and I think Roger covered all those for us, so I won't. And vehicles at 2%, you know, natural gas vehicles were sort of a thing 7, 8, 9 years ago. And then electric vehicles became all the rage, and all the OEMs stopped making natural gas vehicles, started making electric vehicles. So, you know, we'll see how that works out in the long run. The third thing I mentioned in the overview was what are we looking at in terms of these investments that the hyperscalers, and I'm defining hyperscalers as Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft. You know, the numbers, are y'all following this? Like, if you get the Wall Street Journal and you see these numbers, the numbers are too big to digest fully. So this just gives you a sense. Now, this is not an annual capital spend. This is a quarterly capital spend. So those four hyperscalers, in 18, 19, and 20, you see a capital spend by the whole group of about $20 billion. And there were data centers then. They weren't pointed at AI. They were typically pointed at cryptocurrency or some other kind of data. And Virginia's had data centers for years and years and years. And then you see the complete vertical shift in 2024 with the release of ChatGPT and this incredible amount of investment. So, I mean, just to remind you, these are quarterly investments by these companies, and we're up to almost $100 billion a quarter in investment. Some of you may have seen the chart that was making the rounds that in the second quarter of 2025, so just a few months ago, our country experienced more economic input from people investing in artificial intelligence and data centers than in all consumer discretionary spending. Just let that sink in for a minute. That's the first time that line has crossed by any investment, and it's capital dollars. And friends, this chart doesn't even include OpenAI or Elon Musk's effort or the investment that's being made by lots of speculators who are just trying to build a facility and flip it because they think they'll be scarce. So the magnitude of this is just really hard to imagine. I mentioned that ChatGPT was when things went vertical. So this map, this chart just gives you a sense of the launch in 2022 of ChatGPT and what happened to investment after that. So the U.S. has been focused on a conversation about energy for the last 10 years or so, but it's been a philosophical conversation for the most part. It hasn't been a policy-based conversation. And so we didn't make room for the practical implications of the changes that were being made. Over time, I have learned that when you're doing a talk like this and you take questions after, or you're on a panel and you get questions from people, you have to understand when they ask a question, what kind of question are they asking? When I was a young lawyer, I was doing a deal with an old lawyer once, and we had a counterparty who was very argumentative. All through the negotiation, he was just awful. And during one of the breaks, I looked at this senior partner and said, you know, have you ever seen anything like this? He said, son, I've seen this all the time. And let me tell you, there are two kinds of people when you're in a deal situation like this. There are the people that want to litigate everything, and there are people that want to find a deal. So that's where I think we have been when we have energy conversations. We've had a lot of people that want to litigate an issue. They're not taking a measured, thoughtful approach to what the energy system actually requires. They want to argue a perspective. And to be honest with you, my side has been too measured in responding to that. But the truth is we're bound in a way that requires us to actually base our comments in fact, and to think about the long-term implications to the energy system. So what I want to suggest to you is that we have got to start a new conversation that looks at how we work together to find a deal, that we work together across the lines of how energy is created, that electric and gas and nuclear and renewables all come together with policymakers, and we look at the demand profile and understand what it is we've got to do to make this work. Because what we have experienced, we've kind of taken for granted. This shows the emissions levels from 1970 to 2025. We had a peak of carbon emissions in the United States around 2005, and then remember, shale gas comes online 2008, 2009, and you see this quick drop, and now we're back to about 1976 levels in terms of how much carbon we emit because we had natural gas to replace coal. And so a lot of my friends in some parts of the energy sector said to me, well, now let's just get rid of natural gas and we'll be great. And, I don't get upset about that because the benefit that we have is physics and economics. The reality is, if you don't have anything that's dispatchable that you can count on to replace the coal with, you couldn't have displaced coal with natural gas. And you can't just do away with natural gas because there's nothing to replace it. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't engage in a conversation about the next 20 or 40 or 60 or 80 years. That's the conversation we should be having. There was a lot of conversation about about electrification. How are we going to electrify the whole gas system? And if you look at this chart, it's a real simple chart. It shows on the left side how much energy is used on the coldest day of the winter by the gas system. What does the gas system produce? And how much energy does the electric system produce on the right side of the chart on the warmest day of the summer? So the illustration is to say, could we electrify all of the natural gas use in the United States? Well, let's say, just for argument's sake, that you could. You would have to expand by about 3 times the amount of generation and transmission that we have in order to do that. And if we did it, we would do it with a less efficient fuel for those purposes. And if we did that, we would have nothing left over to support data systems or onshore manufacturing. And so that's when I talk about kind of the knock-on impacts of these conversations, that's all we're talking about. Just being thoughtful about our energy policy. One of the issues that I mentioned, the constraints in natural gas pipes, one of the issues that we've got is we also have constraints in electric transmission. This is not criticism of my friends on the electric side. I think they do heroic work and a really good job. But if we're going to expand the electric system to meet the needs that are coming our way, we're going to have to build more high voltage transmission. And you see, this chart stops at 2023, so they're working on it. Understand that they're doing their best. But you've got to have both the focus on this and the permitting capacity to be able to build transmission up. And as I said, they're working on it, and I'm optimistic. I think we're going to make some progress here. But you see that we've been going in the wrong direction as it relates to build out of the grid. Let me leave you with this headline for just a minute. This was in the New York Times less than a month ago. And it's a very good article that I highly commend to you because it takes on the question of what will be required to actually meet this massive energy demand that's coming our way from data centers, AI, and onshoring. And I wanted to give you the highlights of the article. The early headline was, OpenAI has agreed to use NVIDIA chips to power 10 gigawatts of data centers. And you hear that and you think, well, 10 doesn't seem like that big a number. It's just 10. The article also, this is all from the New York Times, so it's not from me. A single gigawatt, if powered by solar, would require 12.5 million solar panels, which would cover 5,000 football fields worth of real estate. Wind turbines would need even more room, and you still have to add reliable power to back up the intermittency of the renewable investment. Now again, I'm not arguing against renewables. They have a place in our energy system. But we've got to understand, as we add renewables, we've also got to add something that fills the gaps when we have those gaps. Everybody with me? These energy questions really aren't that complicated. Let me tell you what is complicated. I mentioned my friends on the electric side and how much respect I have for them. And this is also a speech for another day, but I want to make sure you understand that the way that our electric system works requires people who can balance the generation of electricity with the need for electricity on a minute-by-minute basis across the electric grids in the United States. And that is a phenomenal feat of engineering and management, and they have my respect. We don't teach enough about this in our country because people ought to understand what goes into having to operating an electric system. The big circles that you see are areas that are managed by a central management authority that's trying to project how much transmission will we need, who's going to build it, who's going to be able to generate electricity that comes onto that grid, and there's an enormous amount of complexity to this. And so when I talk about energy policy, it's got to include that as well, because we've got to make sure we're considering all the puts and takes that go into trying to solve a problem as complex as how we generate more electricity and move it around the country in an efficient way. So credit to my friends on the electric side for what they accomplish all the time. I do want to go to questions, but I want to leave you with this. What do we have to do? I mean, I've raised a lot of issues. I've tried to show you a lot of optimism because I haven't. But what do we have to do to make this work? I would suggest to you three things. We've got to find a way to bring stakeholders into a collaborative conversation so that everybody is pointed at a unified vision of what the energy system in the United States needs to be. And friends, if you think this is boring, I want to remind you what Father's Day was like when you had no electricity and it was 1,000 degrees. You know, these things matter to us. We've been taught to take them for granted because we live in a country that has such reliable energy. It is unique in the globe to have the level of reliability that we have. And it's something that we take for granted. Second, we need to focus on an energy system that has 4 attributes. And I would argue to you, if it doesn't have these 4 attributes, it's not sufficient. We need to run systems that are safe. We need to run systems that are reliable. We need to run systems that are affordable. You're going to hear a lot about affordability in the next political cycle. Affordability is an issue, and it should be. We ought to be thinking about the price impact to people that need energy. And the fourth is we ought to think about the sustainability of our energy systems. So if we can get people around those 4 issues and have an honest conversation about what our needs are, we've got a fighting chance. The third thing I'd argue to you is we've got to start thinking about the system as a whole and not just in pieces, and we've talked about that. So we can meet the challenge of this moment. I'm convinced of that. It's going to require that we have a new level of cooperation, a new level of innovation, and a new level of focus. But I would argue to you that if you live in a country that can produce somebody like George Mitchell, you know that we have the ability to be innovative. And we can compete with anybody in the world in terms of innovation. So I like our chances, but we have to get about the work of taking this all seriously and thinking about how we execute these plans in the future. I appreciate your time today. I'll be glad to take questions. Yes, sir.
How do we keep things affordable as we're expanding infrastructure, especially, I know there's been a lot of talk here about the law.
Yeah, our commissioners are very focused on affordability, and commissioners all over the country are. One of the things that's interesting is our regulatory constructs have been fairly stable for a long time because we haven't had anything this disruptive. And because shale gas pushed the price of natural gas down, there was nothing really to question those constructs about. You had lower natural gas prices, you had fairly flat electric demand, and now what I'm really encouraged by is I see regulators all over the country who are being very creative in trying to understand how do we meet this challenge. So for example, we've got regulators who are looking at giving utilities the right to set aside an unregulated business or even a business inside their regulated business, but that's a subsidiary carved out specifically for data centers and larger load customers. And in doing so, they're trying to shield the day-to-day customer from the price impact of those really large loads. There's all sorts of creativity going on all the time. I've heard Commission Chairman David in Oklahoma talk about that recently. I know they're focused on it, and I'm optimistic about their ability to hit both of those targets, supply the energy and the economic development that comes along with it, but make sure that they're thoughtful about the price impact to customers. Does that get to your question? Yes, sir. Thank you. Yes, sir.
What impact, not impact necessarily, but what are your concerns about energy interruption by bad actors?
Daily, sometimes hourly. It's something that's on the mind of anybody that's in the energy production business. And we have seen incidents across the country, and I won't catalog them because I don't want to give the people that do them attention. But we've seen focused attacks on energy producing or transmission assets that have had real consequences for people in communities. We join all the rest of the folks on the gas and the electric side in being a part of the programs that the federal government is executing both at TSA and in the Department of Energy. We've hardened assets in a way that they weren't hardened even 3 or 4 years ago. So we identify all of our critical assets. We seek to harden those in a way that protects them from bad actors. What's also embedded in your question is how do we think about cybersecurity and the AI implications of cyber attacks. That's something that we're very focused on. We're fortunate at our company to have just an extraordinary group of people who run our team. We've got a young guy who speaks all over the country about cybersecurity and our programs. But it's something that it's just like safety. You've got to commit yourself to it every hour of every day. The thing that having won this AGA award for safe operations 8 times in a row, I hope it'll be 9. But what I worry about is complacency, is people thinking, oh yeah, we're pretty good at that. Well, winning the next national championship is the goal, not talking about the last 8. So, the same thing with cybersecurity. And I would encourage all of you, I saw a presentation yesterday about this from a cybersecurity expert. If your passwords don't have at least 10 elements in them, it takes an AI device about 6 hours to completely unlock your passwords. So take that seriously. Yes, sir.
Do you ever discuss reserves? How long can we continue to call on this shale gas? How many years or decades do we have?
Yeah, so looking just at the U.S. supply, AGA does an estimate every year. They published it just last week. We're still looking at over 100 years of supply at this burn rate. If we see the rate go up considerably, either to supply electric generation or LNG, that number could start to deteriorate. But honestly, production has gotten so efficient, and the market looks at price signals. I don't think that in our lifetimes, by the time we run out of natural gas, we'll be in a completely different energy context, I think. And that doesn't even include natural gas in Canada. So there's an enormous amount of natural gas in Canada as well. So I think we're fine from a supply standpoint. It's the right question to ask, though, sir. It's one that we need to take seriously. Yes, sir.
Could you explain, once again, people like me that don't remember stuff very well, the difference between one gas and one oak?
Glad to. Glad to. So in 1906, which I think is 9 years, no, it's 10 years before this company, this club was founded, right? Isn't it 1916? So in 1906, the first gas company was founded in Tulsa that is the predecessor of the company I lead today. Over time, that company got into other operations, especially when it looked like natural gas was going to be depleted. So One Oak did what a lot of companies did across the United States, and they started to diversify their portfolio because they were trying to make sure they had other businesses if we ran out of natural gas. The pipeline business for One Oak was a great success, and in 2014, they decided to spin all of the utility assets out on their own as a separately run public company. It turned out to be a pretty good decision. I think we were trading, when we came out of One Oak, we traded around $33. We closed yesterday at like 80 and change. So they were right. There was hidden value that wasn't being seen because the utility assets were probably underinvested, because it's hard to compete for capital when you're looking at an 8-9% return on a utility versus a 25 to 30 to 40% return on a midstream pipe. So it was a really good decision by the company. I was not there, so I can talk about it. So we are completely separate from One Oak. We do share two directors that are still there from the original spin, and I think that's been good for us. But and Pierce Norton, who operates One Oak, was the person that recruited me to Tulsa, so I'll always be grateful to Pierce. Does that get to your question? Yeah, great, yeah. People talk to me all the time about One Oak.
One more question.
Got time for one more? Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Robert Owens.
Hi, Robert.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Thank you for your presentation.
Yes, sir.
I was wondering, with more and more data centers and more power being consumed in the U.S., do you see the U.S. considering fusion or nuclear energy here in the future?
Yeah, and I thank you for the question about nuclear. I just didn't have time to speak to it. I'm really optimistic about nuclear. But the issue is it takes, and I had this conversation with somebody in the nuclear business last week. You know, to build a nuclear plant, you're looking at 6 to 8 years to permit and construct, and that's if everything goes right. Now, there's an interesting opportunity around small modular reactors. You'll see SMRs talked about. That's what they're talking about. It's like the size of a reactor that runs a submarine, maybe bigger than that, and possibly doing those in chains. There are a lot of companies that are looking at that. I'm optimistic about it, but it's a sort of a tomorrow solution. And the concern that I've got in the short term is we've got to find today's solutions for today's problems and then be thinking about tomorrow and be wise enough to plan for tomorrow. Good?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you all. I really enjoyed being with you. I'll just leave this here.
I wish I had a college professor that was half as interesting as that presentation. I think a lot more people would understand a lot more about energy in this country with that presentation you just made. That was outstanding. You said one thing that meant a lot to me. I think it means a lot to a lot of us. You said that you had a constraint in dealing with some of the factors in our society, and that constraint was that your conversation had to be bound in fact. First principle of the four-way test is it the truth? And so often we find ourselves in conflict with people who don't care what the truth is, they just care what their point of view is. So I appreciate folks that have to work with that. I'll also say that one gas is one of the best citizens of our community, and Mike Neal can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but they're one of the best citizens in our community, and we're grateful for your contributions to our area. So, we got a side mic announcement from Brian Jackson. Brian, you look royal in that purple shirt, my friend.
Thank you very much. Volunteers are loyal, all right? And I'll sum it up like this. When you go to a Tulsa Regional Board meeting, good things happen. And I'll say, afterwards, I met a Kyle Coulter, wave your hand, that's right, from AT&T, and we got to talking, and he saw that loyalty and that fire that we have for Rotary and our partners at Celia Clinton. And he asked, well, do you know of a school that has a need? Well, yes, sir, I sure do. Celia Clinton, over 30 years this Rotary Club has devoted loyalty, and he connected me to a big gift. Now, many of you saw this in the email, though those that read emails, but we'll announce it today. 165 laptops will be donated next Wednesday to the 4th and 5th graders at our Celia Clinton. That's right. That's right. Now here comes that loyalty opportunity. We need volunteers. That's the fundamentals of Rotary. And I want to make sure, so right after Rotary next week, it's short timeline, but 1:30 is the time that the assembly starts with the 4th and 5th graders at Celia Clinton. We have plenty of time. We're real close, just up the street. So be there. Let's pack it. Let's make sure to have our Rotary pins on, our smiles, and just support those students. This is a big day. It doesn't happen every day. You're looking at over $100,000 gift from our friends at AT&T, and I want to say thank you. Now, the next opportunity for volunteers, because I want to get this out, because I won't be here next week. I'll be at Celia Clinton. So following our Service Above Self Day, well, I want you to come out and give dictionaries to the 3rd graders at Celia Clinton. And right there, we need 12 volunteers. So this afternoon, you'll see an email that has the details to this. And so please give consideration on that. That's 2 opportunities, 1 week after the other, at our partner, Celia Clinton. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. I want you guys to note that one of our initiatives this year is to invest in engaging our members in district and zone and international events. Brian took the initiative to do that trip himself, but our club reimbursed a part of those costs to support his efforts there, and we want to do more of that. I encourage you to work with us on that. If you're interested in participating in a zone or a district event, Shannon Vollmer's working on an application form you can fill out that we'll submit to our board to try to get some reimbursement for at least a portion of that. We want to grow our members, not just number of members, but quality of members and experience in Rotary. So this is really cool. Our book today that we're giving to Celia Clinton Elementary is part of our program recognizing Mr. McAnally's speeches. JoJo, the wizard, brews up solids, liquids, and gases. Jenny Hammock picks those books for us, and she just does a fabulous job. Upcoming programs. What's next week? Ted Owens. Anybody from anywhere around here knows who Ted Owens is. That's a big deal. Do what? Oh, yeah, there you go, DJ. You got to throw that in there, don't you? 29th is Service Above Self, and then we go away from Rock Chalk Jayhawk to November 5th. Joe Harris will be here to address us from Boomer Sooner. There's Dave Bryant. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you for your service above self. I look forward to seeing you at the next